Hey, hi friends, welcome to today's video. So in the last video, we created our network layer on top of the BG network library. Now today, we are going to write the view model and call that from our view. Now in this project, we are going to use MVVM architecture. Okay. So most of you must be familiar with the MVVM architecture. I'll just show you one diagram before I jump into the code. So if you see, basically in MVVM, we have three part, right? Three thing. The one is your model, the other is view model, and then we have view. Now view and view model, most of the time we are very much clear. Like view is either your Swift UI view or a storyboard or your XIB. Now this diagram actually is from the Android. That's the reason that you are seeing some Android related thing. So don't worry about that. So view in our case will have a storyboard, XIB or Swift UI. Now as this is Swift UI project, so we have Swift UI. When you are talking about for example a UI kit thing, then the view consists of controller and your XIB slash storyboard. So controller also is a part of view. Okay. Now the second thing is the view model. So again, the view model job, if you can see, is to communicate between the view and your model. Now this is also like we can just create a view model. The view will have a object of your view model. Now view model can communicate to view in multiple ways. Like for example, you can use observer pattern, you can use protocol delegate. In Swift UI, we can have a direct like publishers which can be listen to your view and the view will automatically refresh. Now most of us get confused in the model. So like when you ask model, the most of the answers comes like model is your struct or model is your class which you create for your JSON object. But here if you see in this diagram, model is just not your that class or struct. Model is actually your whole layer which is responsible for data. Okay. Now in that layer you can have multiple things. You can have, let's say that for example in this case you have repository. Repository talks to two things like local data source. For example, if your application is having both core data and the network model, you can have local data source which is fetching your core data and then remote data source which is fetching from network. Again, this remote data source further will talk to your network manager. Okay, and this repository is basically responsible or you can say that repository is your class which is actually bringing the data for you. Okay, so this whole things consists of your model layer. Now in this example, right now I'll not create this local data source and remote data source. I'll just create a repository. Now the reason to go with this repository thing is that if you write a call to include network module into your view model, so that becomes not reusable. For example, that you're not going to have a view where you are having two view model are mostly coupled with your view. Okay, so instead of writing the API call to your view model, it's always good to write in a repository. It's again in repository, it's not like that all the API call has to be written in one repository. You can create multiple repository based on how many different endpoints or type of endpoint you are talking about. Okay, so for example in this project I'm going to create two repository class. So because I have one chapter, so I'll create one chapter repository which will have two API call to get all chapter and get a particular chapter. Now I can also further like decompose it to two different repository. It all depends on how modularity you want, but for simplicity I'll just keep one for chapters and one for verses. Okay, so that's all the overview of this MVVM architecture. Now let's go and start coding. Now we have to come to our UI thing. Now here we have home view. So here what we can create a new group called view and move this home view inside it. Okay, now I'll create one more group called view model and one more for model. Okay, now I have three group. So I already have view which is created. So I'll create a new file here called home view model. Okay, and inside model I will have create a repository thing, that is chapters, because we are going to first call the chapters API. So chapters repository. Okay, and I'll also create one class for our actual model. Okay, so here let's create chapters. Okay, now if you see here, if I click on test endpoint and get all chapters, so yeah, this is a response, right? So I can copy the response, then I'll use the same website, which is QuickType, and let's convert it to I've got this object, so I'll just copy this and let's place it here, and we'll call this as chapter. Okay, and with this chapter we are creating a, sorry, not this one, chapter, and this is our chapters array which we have created a type alias. Okay, so now our model for getting that response is ready. Okay, now let's focus on the repository class. Talk to your network layer, that is the BG network manager, right? So here again let's create first a protocol and call it as chapters repository. Okay, now this will have two functions basically. First is fetch chapters, which will fetch all the chapters, and the second one is fetch chapter, and here we have to pass chapter number. Okay, and as it is returning you publisher, so this has to be returned here. But now in this case we don't want to return a generic object, because I know what it's going to return. So for example, chapters is going to return me array of chapters, and this is going to return me a chapter. So here you don't need to take a generic, you can directly give the object that you want. Okay, we have to import the combine, so let's import the combine. Okay, and this is API error, so we have to import our network module as well. Okay, now the error has gone. Now we'll create the concrete class for this chapter repository, which is chapter repository implementation. Okay, and this will conform to your chapter repository. Okay, so now it will ask you to implement these two methods, so let's go and build it. Okay, now here we are exactly going to do the same thing that we did while creating our example. That means here, like, we build the request and then we made the API call. Okay, let me remove this. Okay, now the first thing is that we need the base URL, so that means guard let base URL. Okay, and this is equals to URL string, and from where we need to take it? We need to take it from our configuration manager. So whatever the target that you are running, based on that you will get your base URL. Okay, looking good. So, and if this fails, then what we have to do? We have to return a fail thing, right? So we'll again do it in a similar way how we did it for our network module. So fail, and then the error, an error we can pass as API error dot URL error. Okay, and this will again go to erase on to any publisher. Okay, the same thing will be copied here also. So let me copy and paste it directly. Now once we form the base URL, we can start building our request. So let request equals to bz request builder, and we have the base URL, so I can pass the base URL. The second thing is a path endpoints dot chapters dot path. Okay, so this is the endpoint that we created in our last video, and it will come here and then it will return this endpoint. Okay, so base URL is done, path is done. Okay, and the same thing again, let's paste it here also, because this line of code is going to same. The only thing which is going to different is that here the endpoint, this is chapter, and we have to pass the chapter number. Okay, and then dot path. Okay, now we have built our request builder. Now we have to set few parameter, that is request dot set headers, and headers we already have defined in our last video as some default header, which is bg headers. So I can just copy this and paste it here. So bg headers dot default headers, copy, and same thing goes here. So now the header is done. I have to also tell what is a request type. So request dot set method, that is dot get. The second one is also get. Okay, after that we don't have any body here, so no body. Okay, so simple thing what we can do, return and then call the network manager. So this has to have object of network manager. Okay, now there are two ways how you can bring the network manager into here. One way, I think most of the case what we see through constructor injection, like we'll use the constructor dependency injection. But what we can do, we can, like, one way we can do it something like, we'll create an object of, for example, private network okay, and we'll pass this here like this. Okay, so now I have the network dependency here. So what we can do, we can use this network dependency to call our request. So network dot make request, or let's call it a network manager, that looks more better. So network manager dot make request. Request is your request that we just created, and the type is in this case it is chapters dot self. Okay, the same thing I can copy and paste here, but in this case the type will be chapter. Okay, so this completes our repository layer. Okay, but I'm not going to use this way of dependency injection because we have already used dependency container, where we are putting this into a container and then using it from there. Okay, so this approach also you can use. I'll just comment it out for a time being, and instead of that, what I'll use @injected private var and this object. Now the question comes that now I have no init method, so how the value will come into it? Or let me show you how we will get data here. Okay, and to understand this concept more in detail, I'll suggest you to watch the video number 4. Okay, so just have a look at this video, and you'll understand in more detail about what I have created or how I have created this dependency injection. Okay, now I'll just show in brief. If you go to my, so to see this, what we'll do, we'll go to a class that we created called injection. Okay, okay, now let's see that what is this. So this is basically a singleton class. Okay, you can see this, and it have a object called container. So if the container is nil, when you call it for the first time, it will call a method called build container. Okay, and it will happen only when you call it for the first time. It will call the build container. And here what we are doing, that we're creating a container. Okay, and if you see, let me go here, this container is coming from Swinjet library. So this is a very good library to manage your dependencies in iOS. Okay, and in the container we are registering for all the dependencies that we are going to use across our application. So instead of like passing it from one class to other class, we have it in one centralized place where we can easily access it throughout the application. Okay, so we have to set the dependency for the network manager also, because so as network manager is going to be used in multiple places, so it's good to have it as centralized dependency container. Okay, so container register. Okay, now this all method is a part of your Swinjet library that I'm using. Okay, so container.register, and here what we want to register, we want to register our network manager. So here we can write network, or basically BG network manager, and then this is a type. Okay, and inside the block what we are going to do is we have to create the object of it. And what was the object for this? The object was this implementation. Okay, and here we have to pass the object of our network module. So here import BG network, and here we can create the concrete object of BG network. Okay, that is this one, I think. Let me check it once more. Yeah, okay. So now this BG network manager is registered. So now we can inject it, and if you see that for injection we are writing this property wrapper. So whenever you call that, it internally tries to get it from this injection. So whenever, let's say that I can go to that class, and here I wrote this @injected private var this. So what it's going to do, it's going to come to this property wrapper, and see it's going to initialize this, means it's going to call this singleton. And the moment you call this singleton and try to access this container, so if the container is nil, it will call this build container and initialize all the values. Okay, okay, so now let's come back to here. Now we don't need to change anything into our repository layer. Everything is good here. Now let's go back to our view model. Okay, now here in the view model, so view model should have a dependency of your repository. Okay. So how we can create? So let's do it in the latest manner. So observer class and home view model. Okay, and the best part of using observable is that you don't need to write published, you don't need to write observed object or confirm this to observable object. Everything is done just with one keyword. That's how you can see that Swift UI is improving. So here let's create a object of chapters. Okay, and then we need the object of our repository class here, that is private let chapters repository, and this will be type of chapters repository. Then let's write a init method, Okay, I don't want chapters here, just the chapters repository. Okay, so this is done. Then the next thing is that we'll have a function. Let's first write a function to fetch chapters, and inside this, what we're going to do, we're going to use this chapters repository, this one, dot fetch chapter. Okay, then we have to sync it. Let me import combine, because we're using combine here, and we will also require a cancelable object. Okay, so in the sync we have completion, so we can write a switch statement here, switch. Okay, and this is going to have two cases. So the first is dot finished, and the second, let me just write a print statement here, API call finished, and the second is going to have dot failure, where you will get the error message if something goes wrong. Okay, so print error. Okay, and here as you can see that we will receive your object, so chapters, and then I can assign this to my chapters. So self dot chapters equals to chapters. Okay, and as this is an observable class, so the moment this chapters is going to have value or it is modified, if I'm using it into my view, it will automatically refresh. Okay, now if you see that it's giving that the result of this is not being stored somewhere, so we have to store this into the cancelable object that we just created. Okay, so this completes our code for fetch chapters. We're not going to write for chapter number, that we'll do in the next video. Now this makes our home view model ready. It's time to go back to the view and use it here, right? So the view is going to have a object of view model, or let's call this as home view model, which is of type of home view model. Okay, no need of creating it as a observed object because we have already done that. Now what I'm going to do is that let me see where it is ending here. So this is my navigation stack. So okay, here I can write on the on appear view model dot fetch chapters. Okay, now this is also crying, so we have to pass object here. Let me just create the object here also. Okay, now the question comes that how it will get the data. Okay, so what we can do is that let's see where we are creating this home view. So it is being created into BG tab view, so there also we have to write the same piece of code. So let me just copy this and go here and pass it here. Okay, so now we are good. Let's see that whether we get the data or not. Okay, so okay, I think here I missed that underscore in my last video. Let me run it again. You can see that we got error here, bad response code, and let's search it from where we are getting this error. Okay, so this is getting thrown from our network module. So I've just put a breakpoint here now, and let's see that what is actually causing the error. Okay, so it's building again, and yeah, let's print the request object. So the URL, okay, so issue is here because if you see we are running this QA environment, and we don't have anything called rapid.com/QA because we have just one environment, and that environment we put in the div. For example, if you see here, this is the correct URL. This and this I have just given to distinguish between the environment. Okay, so I'll change it to dev and stop it and run it again. Let's build successfully again, and this time if I print the same request, so I should not see that QA, and you can see that our base URL concept is also working perfectly fine. Now you can see that now we are getting the proper response from the server. Okay, this is the response that we were expecting with all the chapters. That's all for today's video. Hope you have enjoyed watching it, and if you have enjoyed, then do share, comment, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thank you.